Hi, I'm Mark Redding from Integrity New Homes. If you're considering building or renovating, following is some information and tips for understanding the process. Some of the topics we cover are choosing a block of land, choosing a builder, the estimating process, and understanding contracts. Let's get started. Clients will often ask us, should we renovate or do a new build? So there are a few pros and cons with both. Generally, early on, you want to get a builder out and he'll give you an opinion of whether the place you've got is worthwhile renovating or whether you're going to move would be a better option. Some of the pros with renovating are you get to keep your location, you stay with your friends and neighbours, you've got reduced moving costs, no need to change address, that sort of thing. You don't have real estate or stamp duty costs. Some of the problems are it is dearer to build per square metre in a renovation. You may need to move out, there'll be unforeseen costs. Sometimes it's difficult to match the old with the new, and contaminated materials can also be a problem. Things like asbestos and lead paint that can be found in there. You can run the risk of overcapitalising as well. With new builds, once again, it's cheaper to build per square metre. You've got less maintenance, it's modern safe materials you're working with. You do get possible government grants for moving sometimes. Less variations in new builds than an old one, so your prices generally be more fixed. The moving costs are a problem though, and your stamp duty costs, and you've got to move the whole family, so kids have got to change schools, you're leaving friends and neighbours, that sort of thing. Things to look for when buying land. Now there are a number of items you need to look for when you're doing this. Things like bushfire ratings are a big one. They're very important at the moment. Ratings can go from 12.5 up to a flame zone. Now a flame zone could cost you anywhere up to $100,000, $120,000. So you don't want to buy a block of land and find out you're up for that sort of money at the end. Is the land registered? Now, it might not be registered yet, you might be buying it off the plan, it might be just getting set up, and that could be a few years down the track before it is registered. You've always got to look at access, which could be a big cost. There's no use trying to get into a tiny street or a big long driveway and you can't get access with a truck or a trailer or anything like that in there. So that always adds to the costs if they can't get materials delivered. Things like views and locations are great to look at, but you also have to realise if you're near the ocean, you're in a marine environment, or you could be exposed to high winds. These all add to the cost of the building when doing land. Flood levels are always another one. You need to get a flood level. Most councils will have flood level maps, and it's always careful to make sure you're not in a flood zone, so you might have to build up your block, which could all add to the cost. Soil types always need to be considered. You may be in a sandy area or a rocky area. That could be unstable area or a slip area, so that always needs checking on. Righto, you need to make sure all your services are available. Things like sewer and gas and power. If there is no sewer available, you would have to put on your own sewer system, which can all be a very big cost. Council and developers could also put covenants on land. So you might have to do a certain type of build, a certain type of roof, certain type of windows, certain type of facade. And that can certainly add to the cost of building. These are all things that need to be considered when you're looking for land. When you're looking at finances for construction, you need to do it very early. There's no use going to a builder or an architect, getting something designed that then you can't afford. You need to check it out early, what your limits are with finance so you can get it under control. Make sure you don't sign any documentation until your finance has been formally approved. I'd also suggest talking to a financer and a builder very early. You need to understand those construction costs and borrowing limits right at the beginning of the project. A lot of clients ask, when should a builder get involved? And I always state, as soon as possible. The sooner you're involved with the builder, the better it is. You get your designer, your engineer, your builder can all work together as a team, and the sooner you get them all involved, the better. Don't just go and get your plans done first, get everything organised, then you find out there's problems on the way. Organise the whole lot early. It reduces unforeseen mistakes and guesswork, and do your homework early. Talk to a couple of builders with references. Have a bit of a wish list of your must-haves and your nice-to-haves and explain what you want. Always remember when you're talking to someone, good communication is the key. Rightio, when choosing the right builder, it's worthwhile considering a number of items. First off, it's a big project you're doing, you're going to be working with them for a long time, so you need to be able to get on with them. So you want someone who's knowledgeable and trustworthy. They need great communication skills and a terrific team. What you want to do is talk to a few previous clients, work on their ability to deliver on time and budget, review some previous and current projects, and also get someone who's experienced with what you're doing. If you're going to do an extension, say, get a builder who's done extensions before. Don't get one that hasn't done them before. There are a number of questions you want to ask your builder when you're selecting one. One of the most important ones are you licensed and do you have the appropriate and current licenses? They need to make sure they've got it all under control. You want to be able to cite it all as well. Can you do a drive-by of some of the houses they've built? It's always worthwhile looking to see how they're going, either ones that have been recently done or ones that are a bit older, to see how they're standing up to a bit of time. Can you view references and speak to current clients, which is always great. You want to ask about their team. What sort of people have they got behind them? Who will be supervising the job and how long have they been in the industry? Who do you call in the office if you have administration or invoicing questions? What type of contract does the builder use? Do they have a quality assurance system in place? What sort of relevant experience do you have? What is included and excluded in your estimate? It's always worthwhile making sure, just don't go through what's included, make sure you look at the exclusion list as well. And a builder should run through that comprehensively with you. And also, what happens when something doesn't go to plan? Builders are only human, things won't go right all the time. So you need to know what happens when that does occur. And what it is communication. You need to be able to communicate with them and you need to be able to talk to them and work your way through it. When it comes to designing a home, there are a few options. One of the most basic ones is a draftsman. They do minimal detail on their plans, but they're generally more affordable. If you've got something really set in stone, you just need someone to draw it up, that's probably the way to go. Building designers offer a bit more creative detail and they usually have a better understanding of practical construction techniques. Architects, they provide a lot of detail and a lot of input and will give you a lot of ideas, however their fees can be high. Many builders will also have access to standard plans, so that's just a matter of going in, picking a plan, maybe modifying it slightly and going from there. It is worthwhile to note though that planners can sometimes design projects over your budget, so that's why it's another reason to have a builder involved very early. You can get some concept plans done, they can give you a bit of an idea on a price so that you don't go over your budget too much. Although many builders may have different processes, there is a common building process that will generally work with most of them. And it'll probably start with an initial consultation to discuss your budget and your building requirements. There'll be a selection of design, a site appraisal, probably an approximate estimate like a ballpark, something like that. You'll probably work into a preliminary agreement, which will cover the cost of soil tests, contour surveys, preliminary drawings, and then a fixed price quotation at that point. You'll then work into a building contract and then your working drawings, and then you'll probably pay a deposit and do a colour selection. From there you'll get your building approval obtained. You'll go to either a certifier or council and get approval. Then you'll get a commencement on site, your construction will start, and then it's all up to enjoying your new home. People will say to me, what's the difference between an estimate and a quotation? Well, an estimate is generally a ballpark price. It'll be very basic pricing. You'll usually get it at no cost. There will be limited details and it just gives you a general indication of what the construction cost will be. You might only have a very basic plan or an idea and they can give you an indication of that cost. A proper quotation though, like a fixed price quotation, will have a lot of detail in it, could go to a number of pages. It will usually have a very comprehensive inclusion schedule. It'll have some very accurate drawings to be able to work off, and it should be very specific. A lot of builders though will charge for this. An accurate costing takes time, takes a lot of effort, and there's a lot of work involved in it, so they may charge a nominal fee just to cover their costs for that. Always remember though, the more specific your quotation, the less chance of a dispute and unexpected costs at the end. Also less variations. The more detail you have at the front, the better. Often clients will say, can you just give me a square metre rate on a house? Well, that's not always easy to do. As you can see from the figures there, figure 1 is just 10 metres by 10 metres, works out at 100 square metres, very basic, but it's only got 40 lineal metres of external wall. In figure 2, a bit more complex, it's going to have more hips, valleys, and it's got 50 linear metres of external wall. So the square metre rate for those two places, although they're both 100 square metres, would not be the same. One would be a lot dearer than the other. That's why we don't generally work on a square metre rate. One of the things a builder needs to know early on is what type of soil you have on your site. And this is done with a geotech classification. So a geotechnical engineer will go on site and they'll do a few core drills in selected areas around your site, and they'll go around, test them, and then that brings you back to what sort of classification you have. Now this will go all the way from like an M class, which is moderately active, goes up through the H's, gets right up to a P class, which is a problem, which might have trees, uncontrolled fill, bit of landslip, something like that. From there, a builder can then work on what sort of foundations is required and what sort of extra cost is going to be involved in working on that sort of site. Righto, you're also going to require some different type of surveys on your site. So some of these may be an identification survey, which is commonly called an ident. It'll position where any existing buildings are, distances to boundaries, any features like trees, that sort of thing. There'll be a peg out survey, which when you start on the job, a builder will usually get peg outs which will set exactly where the house is going to go on the site, so you don't get it on the wrong spot. There'll be a boundary survey which will set where the actual boundaries are. These are usually organised by the owner at the end of the job. There'll be a contour survey, which is very important, which I'll explain a bit in the next slide. There will also be RLs, which are reduced levels. Now these will give you a height. Now these are usually above the AHD, which is an Australian height datum. Now there'll always be a benchmark, and that determines how high your floor level is, where the roof height's going to be, that sort of stuff. With the contour survey, as you can see in this slide, the closer the lines are together on the site, the steeper it is. And then the further apart they are, the flatter it is. So this then determines how much of a step's going to be in the house, whether it needs retaining walls, that sort of thing. You can also see highlighted at the front there where the benchmark is. That's your Australian height datum, and then everything from the house is taken from there. This contour survey will also put in where the fire hydrant is, where there's any telephone points, where a water meter is, and where the electrical box is. So it gives you a fair bit of information, a contour survey. A builder will usually want one of these very early so that he can then price it and get things spot on for you. Structural engineering is another item that's going to be required early as well. It's based on your geotech classifications, and then what happens is it determines the size of your concrete foundations, number of piers, size of reinforcement, that sort of stuff. The engineer will also determine any structural steel that's required and the size and the configuration of it. He'll also do any retaining walls over 1 metre high requires engineering, so he'll do that for you. They'll also do inspections prior to pouring concrete for piers and foundations, and this is required because it gets signed off at the end. A certifier or council will ask for a certificate from the engineer to say that that's right. Inspections will also be carried out for structural steelwork. Engineering is not usually required at development application stage, but it will be required for the construction certificate. Rightio, we're going to talk now about BASIC requirements and cost implications. Now, BASICS is a Building and Sustainability Index. It's a government program that's been designed to reduce your energy use. It takes into consideration things like water efficiency, which are your ratings for your taps, your showers, that sort of stuff, insulation requirements for your thermal, and also your energy ratings, things like what sort of hot water systems you got, whether you've got solar, that sort of thing. It'll also take in the orientation of the house. If you've got big windows facing west, they will want some sort of covering on that, and the size of the eaves, that sort of thing can all impact on it. It's, as I said, a government program. It's very comprehensive and it can add a fair bit of money to the cost of your job. Rightio, when it comes to approvals, it can get a little confusing. A DA is a development application. Now that has to go to a local council. They assess it, and then what they do is give you approval on that development application. From there, you then have to go to a CC, which is a construction certificate. Now that can either be done by your local council again, or you could go to a private certifier. And then what happens there is that has more information on it. It'll have your engineering attached to it at that point. and they give you then approval to build. The other option, of course, is a CDC, which is a Complying Development Certificate. Now this can be either done through, once again, your local council or your private certifier, but if you meet a certain number of requirements in that in your construction, well, one of them can give you approval without going through the process of the DA and the CC. Rightio, we've got the Home Building Compensation Fund. Now this is the old home warranty insurance scheme that was introduced by the government. What it's there for is initially to protect homeowners if a builder goes bankrupt or dies on the way through construction. It's required for all building projects over $20,000, and builders need to pass numerous checks and assessments before they can be issued with this insurance. And they're usually only issued with so much insurance amount and so many jobs that they can do. So it limits the amount of work they can do. They're also looking to make sure that the builder's margin is going to sustain him through there. They don't want a high risk builder, and generally that'll be one that's earning less than 20%. They want to make sure those percentages are up so that he doesn't go bankrupt and upset things on the way through. With the contract, this is going to be probably one of the most important documents you're going to have in there. All jobs over $5,000 are going to require a contract. Now your contract's going to lay out your specifications of the home, it's going to have inclusions, colour selections, and the conditions that both parties are going to adhere to. The contract's usually made up of about 5 main parts. There'll be the contract itself, which will have the terms and conditions of the build, it'll have site assessment, variations, dispute resolutions, it'll have details on all those things. It'll also have the specifications or work schedule. So this will be the specific products and works to be provided by the builder. There'll be the plans, which have been drawn up by either the builder or an architect and approved. There'll be your geotechnical report, your contour survey, that sort of thing. And if you've done it at that time, it'll probably have colour selections in there, which will be your external colours, your internal colours, what type of flooring you're going to have, your kitchen finishes, that sort of thing. With the contract though, it's very important that you spend at least 1 to 2 hours with your builder, and he explains all the details in your contract when you're signing. He should spend a lot of time to go through there. If you've got any questions, ask him at that time. There may be other items that are also attached to the contract. There'll be your home warranty insurance, some title searches, there'll be the estimate that he's given you or the quotation. The builder's license should be in there. He should give you a copy of that along with his insurances. There'll be a consumer building guide, which is a Department of Fair Trading publication, and there'll be specifications and those sort of items. Prior to signing your contract, what you want to do is ask your builder in advance for a draft copy of their standard contract so that you can review it. What you want to do is check if the builder is using an approved building contract. We always like to use one from an MBA or HIA, which are industry associations. And if any wording in the contract seems a little ambiguous, always have it reviewed by a lawyer. Effectively, we would always recommend any contract you sign, you seek legal advice if you have any questions at all. In residential construction, there are 2 main types of contracts that are used. One is called a fixed price contract. So effectively, it's fixed costs subject to conditions. Now, those conditions may be things like rock excavation, variations, some sort of council conditions, that sort of stuff. This would be probably the most common one you would see. It covers any materials or subcontractor increases are covered by the builder, and it's also preferred by banks and lenders. Got to remember though, the variations can still occur with a fixed price contract. The other type of contract that's used commonly is a cost plus contract. Now effectively, extensions and renovations are often built this way, mostly because there's a lot of unknowns, a lot of selections haven't been made, so a ballpark figure is given and then you run from there. And then what happens is the builder charges all labour and material costs plus a margin, usually around 20% I would say. It can remove the incentive for the builder to get the best value, but generally if you've gone with a builder that you trust and one that you can communicate with well, you shouldn't have any troubles there. They'll have regular suppliers, regular subcontractors that they use, and I don't think that would be an issue. In the contract, you'll see something called a schedule of payments. Now this usually refers to a progress payment schedule, and what it is a list of payments due as construction stages are reached. So things like when you've got your slab down, frame, your roof's on, lock up, fix out, practical completion. Now these are just some of the items. It may be expansive, it may be very small, it just depends on the size and type of the job. One thing to note though, most builders will not be asking for more than 60% before lock-up stage. Now there are exceptions to that, of course. If you're on a very steep block, you've got lots of retaining walls, a lot of excavation, that sort of thing. Obviously there will be more costs at the front end of the job than the back end. So it's interesting to see. It's always worthwhile running through that list with your builder to see where they all are, and it's always an exciting time when you get into it as well to start. Before you start, there will be a number of things that you need to provide the builder. Proof of ownership is obviously very important. Now this will be in the form of rates notice, a solicitor's letter, that sort of thing. You'll also need to provide proof of funding. So there'll be a bank letter of approval, or you might have to show a statement. Now some builders may even require you to do a joint bank account, and you may have to put the money for a progress payment in as each stage is reached. Unless it's quoted by the builder, the owner may also have to remove any buildings or trees or anything like that on site. There'll usually be a condition in your contract about site visits. Now generally builders are very happy for owners to come on site, but really you only want to access the building site when you're accompanied by the builder or his representative. They're pretty dangerous spots and you don't want to be going and roaming around there on your own. What you've got to do too is not give any instructions to any trades on site. It's always great to have a talk to the trades, that's fine, but things can soon go pear-shaped if the instructions don't go through the correct channels. What you want to do is communicate only with your builder, the site supervisor or their representative, and always in writing is the best way to go. In your contract there will be details on hidden site costs that can occur. Now things like rock, which you need uniform bearing all the way around your site. So if you hit it at one point, you need to make sure you get it at others. So this can increase your pier depth, that sort of thing. If the builder hasn't put an allowance in for it, you may have to pay for export or import of spoil if it's required. And things like illegal dumping. If you're in an older area, things like asbestos, things like that could be in the ground that aren't known at the beginning of the job. These sort of things can really add to the cost and be unexpected on the way through. Although you do get a geotech early on, surprises still can arise. So it's always worthwhile having a contingency for that. In the contracts, you'll often see references to PC and PS amounts. Now these are prime cost items and provisional sums. So what a prime cost item is a fixture or fitting that has not been selected at the time of contract. So this will be a thing like a oven, a cooktop, a vanity, a WC, that sort of stuff. And a provisional sum, a PS amount, is an estimate to carry out a particular work that cannot be given at a different amount. So this will be things like piering, the removal of spoil, that sort of stuff. Some builders may have a standard list of inclusions, which will have amounts and items selected already. Some builders may just put allowances against their PC and PS amounts. So what you want to be careful of though is try to reduce those amounts all the way through so that you don't have too long a list with PC or PS amounts against them. The more you have selected at the front, the better it's going to be for your contract signing and less variations on the way through your job. Rightio, a variation is a change that's going to be made to the job on the way through. Now, before it goes ahead, it must be in writing and it should be signed by the builder and the owner. Now, a simplified version of a variation process will be the owner will request a variation, the builder will respond whether the variation can be done. It could be too late in the job to be able to do it. He'll also supply a cost for that variation. If the owner agrees, they will sign the variation and return it, and then the builder completes the variation and invoices. Now, variations will usually include an admin fee for the cost of doing that cost and notifying all the relevant trades, that sort of stuff. When your job's almost complete, you'll get a notice of practical completion. Now what that is the house is fit for habitation, but it may not be 100% complete. Things like the final cleans and a few minor items might be done. All your major items like your plumbing, electrical, etc. will all be completed. What we usually do is we meet the owner a week or two prior to handover and establish that practical completion has been reached. The builder finishes off any of the remaining items, does the final cleans, gets the occupation certificate if it's part of his contract, and then the owner's invoiced, they pay their final figure, and then a handover date's organised, all the keys are handed over, and the owner takes note of any minor items that still require rectification and sorting out at that point. It's a pretty exciting time for the owners and the builders as well. It's always good to see happy owners at the end, and it's always great to see them go into the house and really get that feel for it at the end. There will be a defects or maintenance liability period in the contract, generally around 13 weeks, and it's starting from the date of practical completion. Now what happens is if something urgent happens after you've moved in, you can contact the builder or the relevant trade straight away, absolutely, if your hot water's not working for some reason. But your defects liability period usually covers things like sticking doors or windows, a few items like that. What you do is you just keep a running list, and at the end of the 13 weeks you hand in your list to the builder, and most builders will often send you a reminder to say that that time is up as well. The builder then organises a representative to visit the site. He'll investigate each item, work out whether it's what the outcome is, what trade needs to fix it, that sort of stuff. And then they're contacted and any required repairs are taken care of. In conclusion, we want to reiterate about recommending the following. We always want to involve a builder as early as possible. Always choose a builder you feel comfortable with. It's a big process. Don't feel that you have to go with the cheapest price. Go with a builder that you're comfortable with. Always check their references, their licenses and their work history. Remember, there's no silly questions. Always go in. If you've got a concern of any sort, ask it straight away. The builder is always happy to answer it. And remember, it's all about communication. Keep the lines of communication open at all times.